Hello, welcome to the Gamer Librarian Podcast. I am your host Adrian, and today we will discuss the recently released Resident Evil 4 Remake, the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and more. Afterwards, be sure to follow for updates on future episodes. Thank you for joining. Let's start off by talking about the Resident Evil 4 Remake, something that has been coveted and desired for so long from not just Resident Evil hardcore fans, but I think just gamers in general. Everyone's been looking for that next step in the Resident Evil franchise. And while Resident Evil 7 was probably a step in the right direction with its first person uh, take on their games, the atmosphere that they use to build these games with their world building and their level design truly propels Resident Evil into entirely new lights than what it was before the remakes and new games started to come out. Resident Evil 4 is a testament to that. Everything that Capcom has learned in the past few games that they used, utilizing the RE engine, with from all the way Resident Evil 7, and then we had Resident Evil 2 remake and 3 remake, and then we even had Resident Evil Village, which I never really played the DLC of, but I still got to get back and do that. This game is so far the pinnacle of RE games that I've played. It's snappy. The controls feel so much more in tune for what you would find for a Resident Evil game. It's been a long time since I played Resident Evil 4 original. I think maybe the last time I played it was probably around the same time Resident Evil 2 remake was coming around. I'm not necessarily certain, but I remember when I originally played the game on GameCube. I don't think I beat it until a month or so after. I know it took me quite a long time. The combat was a little difficult for a kid my age, I would say. It's very snappy, and you have to use the turnaround system. And on the game controller, all that kind of just falls out the window, especially when you think about the hardware and how the game is running. But obviously, that game's 20 years old now or so. It's old enough to get a proper remake, which is probably what everybody should be flocking towards, is the new one that just came out. I recently just got up to Chapter 7. I just beat the Mendez fight. He's the big Mr. X man that you fight, which was really fun. I think the pacing for this game is a lot better considering the kind of flow that the first game has. I mean, you meet some characters and they kind of just get tossed aside after you meet them. But going through the village of Resident Evil 4's campaign has been harrowing. I started it on hard difficulty, and I definitely are at like maybe 100 deaths already just by on Chapter 7 alone. The game's getting harder and harder. The chapters where they have you try to conserve ammo, because it feels like that's what they're trying to do. I'm having a very difficult time having ammo in this game. I come down to just my pistol most of the time. I have the bolt gun, the basic shotgun, and I think like a new pistol, but I haven't really used the new pistol at all. I got all the DLC weapons, which are fine, but I mostly just stick to the pistol and the hunting rifle, the basic pistol that you get, and it's got me pretty well. But the big crucial item I think is probably what everybody's probably upgrade or utilize most is the combat knife. And in this game, it looks like you get about two different kinds of knives. You get the combat knife, which is what you use to stab typically, and slash, and then do I think like critical stab attacks when you stagger an enemy. But that item can break, and you can repair it by spending a certain amount of gold at the merchant, which is another nice design. I love that they kept the merchant for this game, just like the whole game. And yeah, I've been having difficulties playing it on hard mode. A lot of the times, these combats get really long. We just did the defense house part with the guy that you meet. You send Ashley off somewhere so she's not in the way, which is good. and it's just enemies after enemies in like three waves. They do the latter part, and then I think a newer enemy shows up. I don't remember if the bullhead guy is in the original. I don't remember him being there at all. I know that the chainsaw enemies are there, but they got the bullhead guy in, and this guy is he's beefy, he's fast. Sometimes he has a sledgehammer or some kind of hammer that he uses. But in the house encounter, he doesn't have it. But that's still really difficult. That was a hard fight, but I'm looking forward to seeing what else comes after Mendez for Chapter 7. There is, I heard there's quite a lot of differences for this game compared to 4 original. I don't necessarily care about what's different. I kind of want to see what they do to improve it in terms of story or things like that. I like to see what happens with Leon and the president's daughter after this game, because after this, I think besides spin-off stuff, obviously the next Resident Evil game that we'd be getting is Resident Evil 5 and maybe 6 in some kind of remake fashion. I think that they're still fine games. I don't think you need to spend all that time and resources remaking them fully. Obviously, some things about those games taste-wise hasn't held up. Resident Evil 5 is a big one, but I think 6 is some really good middle ground for like B actiony Resident Evil. You know, it takes a lot of what was still fun about the action stuff from 4 and 5, and it's just kind of bogged down by a kind of unwell-paced story and the fact that it's split up between 3 characters. But I still think those are relatively fun games, and I hope that Capcom doesn't just outright forget about them. I hope that they use what they learned about Resident Evil 4 remake and the other remakes to maybe give those other games some decent polish or some new additives or something that makes them feel like whole new games again. I think that'd be really nice. And RE4 remake is gorgeous on the PS5. Halfway through this game already, most of it's spent in the rain, and it still looks great while you have all these raindrops hitting you and the enemies and everything. The more enemies on screen, obviously the areas get a little hectic because you have to turn around and make sure you know where enemies are or what locations you're gonna have to move to so you get swarmed and all that stuff. But the combat loop of the game is really good. I think if you start using all of the mechanics that the game offers you, like you shouldn't just unload all your weapons into an enemy hoping it dies. You should be a little more strategic about it. Use your pistol for like headshots and stagger them while they go to throw items or do an attack. So maybe you can get the prompt to kick them or stab them when they're down, which would help to do damage and mitigate them turning into Plagas enemies, which become like the mutated versions. You want to get them killed as soon as possible before you even before they get a chance to turn, which is hard sometimes, especially when there's a lot of enemies and you're trying to take care of Ashley and you got to move from one place to the other. So a lot of times, if you're not familiar with a level or maybe you're low on resources or Ashley's down or something, you do got to make a choice. Like, do I move from over here and hopefully Ashley stays safe for a little while, or do I try to take her and find some resources and then fight the enemies while it's going? Some of these areas are made really well. Like if you know your way around them and what enemies would come through certain corners, you can kind of train a whole group of them. Maybe if you got grenades or flash bang stuff, you can toss them their way, and that'd be really helpful. Um, yeah, I truly think this game is amazing, and I'm having so much fun playing it. I think the last Resident Evil games have been 10 out of 10s across the board in a lot of aspects, and Resident Evil 4 just solidifies that Capcom really knows what they're doing with these games. And probably when I beat this game, I'm going to try and go back to maybe Village and do the DLC. I'm not sure what that's even about, but I know it's about, I think, the the Jake or whatever his name's daughter's dreams, right? I don't know anything about it. I'll have to play it. I might have even bought it. In terms of Resident Evil, I think the next thing that we even know that's even coming out is the Isle of the Dead movie, like the animated one that they teased not even too long ago, a few months. I'll probably give that a watch. I think it'd be cool to see what they do with that. I think Leon's in it, so it might take place after Resident Evil 4 remake or however the timeline goes. But yeah, I think Resident Evil is in a good spot. They push the big red button to remake RE4, their biggest game to date, at least 20 years ago. Kudos to you guys and Capcom. You guys have been doing really good work with this franchise and everything under your belt with the RE engine, Devil May Cry, Monster Hunter World. Really great games, really. Now, something I just want to touch on briefly is the arrest of actor Jonathan Majors, who has been arrested in regards to a assault that he did on some person and or allegedly did to a person, and I hope that the persons involved or him himself get uh, punished or adequate justice for any types of wrongdoing. Don't hurt people, but as an actor, I think he has put the company Disney and the heads behind the Marvel Cinematic Universe in a very weird predicament because this mirrors someone else's kind of actions in a few years ago, 2020, 2021, where another famous actor for a superhero or a prominent superhero movie coming out did something in the real world, and that has maybe cost them their job, and rightfully so. If this is confirmed to be accurate, that this person, Jonathan Majors, caused physical harm to somebody, uh, I think they should be punished accurately, including being removed from their role from this movie, which would be detrimental to the franchise. I'm not sure what else movie he's going to be in the future, but he does have an Avengers movie set up. Avengers, Kang the Conqueror, or whatever. It might not ever happen. We'll probably get like some other villain, Ultron 2 or something. But that's really scary because the MCU has just gotten off of the bad start that they had with Phase 4, which to some people's varying degrees is probably meek. I'd probably say it is a little meek. You kind of got things plucked in from every which corner of the MCU. I mean, we only really got a few movies, right? I guess you can count Black Widow as a Phase 4 movie. Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, obviously, and then Thor. Um, but they got the TV shows, which was She-Hulk and Moon Knight and Miss Marvel, and those are like the more ragtag kind of out of left field kind of shows that they have showcased. But Phase 5 is pretty barren. All we had was Ant-Man 3, which I think was pretty good. It felt like a decent kind of Ant-Man movie. It focused on the Ant-Man family itself. It didn't have the um, annoying to me like side characters that they had in the first two movies. But I definitely don't think Ant-Man 3 was all that great. Obviously, Kang was a really good character. I don't necessarily would have made him the Ant-Man 3 villain, right? Maybe MODOK could have been that in a little more kind of way, but it definitely felt weird having Ant-Man fight Kang by the end, and then their little spat of "I don't have to win, we both just have to lose," and then it just kind of feels like Ant-Man won in the end anyway. That that to me didn't really strike home to like what kind of villain you're setting this guy up to be. Like he's supposed to be your Thanos, and he can't even take on simply just Ant-Man. He just kind of gets thwarted, and we're expected for him to just come back, which by the actions of the actor Kang the Conqueror will probably never come back in the MCU, which um is a very odd turn, because this mirrors DC and their entire hoopla with Ezra Miller playing the Flash, and I think that sometimes you just can't trust every person for every job. Even if it's not an action or something related to the job itself. As a person, you have to showcase and promote the standards and kind of behavior that you'd want everybody else to exhume onto others. And if you're not doing that correctly, then you should be I wouldn't say attacked for it, but you should be aware that the wrong things you're doing have consequences. And I hope that Jonathan Majors gets the punishment that he deserves for whatever happens. But I, as a fan of the MCU, I think that they should probably just get a whole new actor, because we don't want to be waiting another 2 years for whatever to come down the line, and then some other actor does another horrendous action that just ruins a franchise of movies that we all have come to at least love until now, right? But I think after everything with the last few actors for these movies, we just learned that like you just can't take all these people as like kind and good-hearted all the time. They're just people. So that's all I really wanted to say about that. I am a little concerned for the MCU, but I only think this only really hurts the grander scheme of the MCU. I think that maybe this whatever Avengers movie they have with Kang could probably be just scrubbed and replaced with a different villain, or just do a different actor for Kang. That's probably the easiest way to go about it. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about what I plan to be doing in the future after I beat RE4. I still got to get back into Wulong and Metroid. Still two great games. Wulong is difficult. A lot of bosses take attention and learning. You kind of could force your way through them. You just kind of do attacks and hope not to get hit, and just try to stagger them as you can. But I've learned to just try to be a little more patient with some of these bosses. A lot of their moves aren't that hard to let hit you. Parrying them is pretty easy. But it's definitely utilizing what you have at the moment. I've been trying to change my builds to do a little more elemental or magic damage, and also regain my spirit bar as I do attacks and stuff. So I think I'm towards the end, but this game really just throws out a lot of areas or levels to you. Not all of them are crucial. They have like main battlefields, which are like your story progression stuff, and then they have like sub battlefields, which give you they're like smaller segments of already played levels, but they give you optional bosses and things to find, which is cool. But I don't think I really want to do all of them. I've never really been someone to 100% games, at least like Souls games. If I miss a boss or some secret weapon or area, it's never really bothered me that much. Sometimes these games do end up being too long, and I just want to beat these bosses and see what the game has to offer in the end. Maybe we'll get some DLC and stuff, but it definitely does suck when your time is split between so many games. I know that fall to winter, like fall one year to winter the next year, kind of, or springtime the next year is like the big game timeline. All the games come out around then. So if you're anyone like me who just buys games when they come out, you know that on certain days or weeks you're kind of picking and choosing what game you at least want to play at that time, depending on what you've already been going through. But just like Metroid Prime, I'm still trying to beat that. But I'm glad the game's on the Switch because I could bring that with me to places. That's probably obviously the biggest plus to having a Switch as a portable console, is bringing it with you. So, looking at you, Xbox and Sony. Now, I don't know what other games are coming out for the rest of the year. I kind of was just going to stop buying new games at RE4 for at least till the summer, because I'm not really sure what else is coming out the rest of the year, and not all of them look, super fantastic. I think you have to have a kind of critical or wary eye to a lot of games that you see being shown off and showcased, because sometimes they're not what they usually are promised, or they're not like the same as the final product as trailers would show, which is varying degrees of good or bad. But maybe I think the only games I'm super looking forward to are maybe Final Fantasy 16 and Breath of the Wild 2 and Pikmin 4. That's probably it. I wasn't that biggest fan of Breath of the Wild 1. I like a lot of the older Zelda games a little more. Twilight Princess is like the pinnacle one for me. But I do understand like the value that Breath of the Wild had on maybe not the Zelda franchise, but probably just video games in terms of its accessibility, its terms of being an open world game with what it offers. I'm not necessarily a big fan of its choices for the stamina and the durability for the weapons, and I think the Korok seeds are an abomination. No collectible should be that high in abundancy to need, but to anybody who's gotten them, that's perfectly fine. But I am very excited to Breath of the Wild 2 because I hope this game does a little more in terms of its combat and its items. Something for me for Zelda, I always liked going through a dungeon and then or like the open world and seeing what needs to be solved with certain items. Like, oh, I can't do that yet, but at some point I can come back and do it. I really loved that. Now, Breath of the Wild doesn't really have that. You kind of just get your utility items off the gate, and then you can just use them when you go, which isn't terrible. But I do like going through dungeons, finding the items, and then going back to what I missed and discovering them. Pikmin 4 is right around the corner. Never played 3 because I never really had a Wii U, and with the Wii U shop and all that kind of going down, I'm probably never going to play it ever. But that's perfectly fine. Pikmin 1 and 2 are still one of the most unique and treasured games on any console. If you've ever had a GameCube, you've probably played Pikmin and probably either tried your best at it early on, or maybe you're lucky enough to fully get through it. But Pikmin is a really fun kind of puzzle, time and resource management game. You kind of got to be on your ball with that, and I hope it has co-op. I think it might have co-op. I think 3 had it. 4 doesn't have co-op. It'd be a really big misstep. Now I'm also looking forward to trying out the Horizon Zero Dawn DLC or whatever Horizon 2 is. I think it's Forbidden West. I bought it and played it, but I never finished it. Sometimes games are just too large. So that's not a huge caveat, but I did like to do a lot of the side quests. I wanted to see what I could find and do out there. But it is a big game. That map is gigantic. And I don't even think I'm anywhere near halfway through with the regular story. It just has um, so much to explore and offer in that game. I just got to give it like time to breathe, and I'm probably just gonna give it my all once the DLC comes out and play it in the summer. Diablo 4 has a beta just dropped or dropping recently. Um, I only ever really played Diablo 3 like fully with like investment time. Um, but I am looking forward to 4. I think I'll skip out on the beta and probably the launch of Diablo 4. If anyone remembers the beta, or I'm sorry, the launch of Diablo 3, you remember that it was rocky. But I think I hopefully believe that Blizzard has their shit together, at least with some games. Jedi Survivor is coming out. Um, I never really liked the first one. I remember starting it for like the first time, and I was really excited to play this Dark Souls style Star Wars game. But I remember it being really kind of challenging early on, especially with the parry system, trying to block the blaster attacks, especially when they're behind you, which is really difficult. And I wasn't a big fan of the levels in it. There are some pretty cool ones, but a lot of the hallways made fights really difficult. A lot of the bigger bosses, not I want to say bosses, like the bigger creature monsters were hard to at least take down the first couple times. The bosses were absolutely the best part of Jedi Survivor. You fight the Ninth Sinsters and Darth Vader and stuff. Those were phenomenal. Probably the best part of the game was just the fights themselves. The peak combat uh, was shown in the boss fights. You had a lot more options with like your interaction with that one character. I think the one-on-one fights for Jedi Survivor were probably the best that the game had to offer. But I am excited to see the second one. I liked it enough to want to go back and play the first one even. I don't think I will. I didn't really like it that much. But maybe if there's DLC out for it, there's probably not. In other news, I've been caught up on the Walking Dead shows. I recently caught up and finished season 7 of Fear the Walking Dead, and they had just shown off the teaser or trailer for season 8, the final season of Fear the Walking Dead. Now, if you ask me, when they first showed off Fear, I never would have thought it would have even hit like 4 seasons, let alone 8. I think the first 2 seasons are like their really rockiest start. We have them, obviously, you get like the outbreak begin in season 1. That's kind of hit or miss. I think they did the best they can to show like the dynamic of transitioning from being a normal person into a person who has to not only deal with the world it's becoming, but somebody who has to start making decisions in those worlds, big crucial decisions that have people's lives at stake. I think season one is underrated, but it's definitely critically not super great, especially maybe considered season one of regular Walking Dead. But as Fear goes on, it takes some drastic turns. I mean, by season 4 or 5, Morgan is introduced. So is Dwight. If anybody's already been caught up on The Walking Dead, spoiler alert. But if you if you've been watching Fear the Walking Dead now, I don't think you care enough of the spoilers for anything. Because it's an okay show. I think Fear the Walking Dead's actual biggest problem, it's just probably the same problem that the regular Walking Dead has, is it's switching back and forth on who and why and how we should be killing. That's that's so flip floppy in this show. It's Morgan. Morgan's character is like the one who was doing that in the main show, and he just kind of brings it over into this one. Now, this still has me excited for season 8 though, because we get to see the finale of something that we thought never would have actually got an ending. At least for me, I kind of thought it would. Fear the Walking Dead would just kind of end on some weird cliffhanger or just some weird ending where it never really tied into anything grander, but it definitely seems like it will be. You get Morgan definitely meeting up with some characters who haven't been seen in the last few years, and some other characters are going to reunite. I won't speak on who's going to finally be towards the end of the season for now, but if you haven't caught up to 7 and you like The Walking Dead, you should probably get on that, because it definitely seems like the Fear the Walking Dead finale will tie into the later stuff that they do in the future, especially with World Beyond, which I think ended. I'm certain it's ended. I think I keep seeing things about it being the final season while I'm watching it. Season 2 of The World Beyond I never watched before. I think I might have started it, but it is worse in my opinion than Fear the Walking Dead, because you're following characters that you still obviously don't know, but they're characters that have already experienced this world and are going on a new adventure, and it's a story where you're going to learn both of those things. You're going to learn about the characters and their previous past, to whenever this takes place, like 10 years into the Walking Dead now, and then their current journey, which is like to go find these two girls' fathers who's been taken by, I won't say who, but he has been taken for whatever reason. And I don't know. This show it's hard to like, because there isn't a lot to really grab at you. There isn't a character that sticks out in my mind. I think every kid in it probably is really annoying, except for the big kid who got beat by his father. I think his story is really good. Um, but everyone else is just kind of it's just kind of, it doesn't hit as much. But it's the finale of this season that I'm really looking forward to. I haven't watched it, and I know it ties into Dead City or whatever the French show was going to be with Daryl. I'm unsure, but I'm probably going to watch it one time and never look back on World Beyond ever again, because World Beyond has probably the one thing I like about it. It's probably my favorite is its walker encounters, which it's creative, which I think is probably super crucial to these shows, is how you show the walkers and what kind of situations you're putting people in with those walkers. You get walkers that are like part of the ground, like the earth itself, and there's like moss and mushrooms going on them, like they hide like that. I wouldn't say hide, but like they're hidden because they're covered by foliage. You get walkers that have been on fire for like a decade or something, which is kind of cool in and of itself. That's probably what I liked about the most about the show is the weird walker encounters. The plot is like hit or miss. There's a lot of things where these younger kids are they're newer to killing the dead for the most part, and that they don't do a great job of it the whole time. It's just kind of like how are they surviving on this journey for months on end? I mean, that's like hearsay or whatever. It's a TV show, but you definitely feel like the world beyond isn't as dangerous as the worlds that we've seen in the other two shows. That's apparent. It doesn't have like the same shock value, in season 1. I don't think there's a crucial death at all in that entirety of season one, which I think is probably its biggest misstep. You kind of got to give us a reason to like these characters, even in their worst and saddest or weakest moments. That's what I would have to say. But I'm very hopeful for the new Walking Dead content. The Daryl show hasn't gotten a trailer yet, but I know I've seen videos of people recording him like on set doing stuff. Same thing with Rick. I think Rick's been spotted doing um, scenes for his show, or maybe it's like the same show for them. But we're also getting Dead City, which has the actors who play Negan and Maggie from the main show coming into their own stuff. There's 5 shows now. I never thought there would have been five Walking Dead shows. I was baffled by the fact that they announced a movie or a movie trilogy way back when, but the times changed, and that seems really cool. New York has always been kind of in the back thought of everybody's mind, like how does New York work in terms of The Walking Dead? Like what happened? And as far as I know, I'm pretty sure it's just all the bridges of Manhattan were just bombed out, so all the walkers either just trapped there until they die, or they just like fell off all the buildings or into the water and stuff. But it's going to be cool, especially to see this dynamic play out in their own mini series or so. I hope it only gets one season. I would not want to have to wait another year or more for more Walking Dead content, but it's probably going to get one season. Both of these spin-offs, probably just one. I think that's the best option. But again, it's going to be really good to see these two as a dynamic, because it's something that you don't see in the comics at all, right? Maggie's relationship, as far as I remember, with Negan towards the back half of the comics kind of doesn't get as heated or divisive or even as focused in the main show versus the comics. Maggie just kind of almost accepts it by the uh, by the time skip and Negan coming out of his cage to help take on the Whisperers. I think Maggie's kind of let on that she's relatively okay with Negan hanging around. I'll have to remember or have to reread the comics again. But I think that's really cool, especially because seasons 10 and 11 were so filled with tension between Maggie and Negan, right? I think they're going to save Maggie's kid in the new show. I think that's really good dynamics between the two. I'm glad both those characters stuck it out this long, or both those actors stuck it out to make this show or these new shows what they are, right? I mean, Maggie's been in the show since season 2, and Negan's been in since season 8, and it's great. I hope that the entire AMC universe of the shows gets a nice little bow wrapped up, because I don't think anybody expected spin-offs from the main show, right? Fear the Walking Dead being announced, I remember, was like really out of left field, and then when it landed, it was kind of like a bitter taste in everybody's mouth. It was kind of not as good as the first one, but I would say it outshines the first one in a lot of ways, in some ways. But I think maybe with the World Beyond and the rest of the 2 new shows coming out, the entire series is going to have a really nice ending and just complete finish, which I think is something that franchises don't really ever get. And I just hope that maybe we can learn this time and just kind of let, some franchises have like a definitive ending. Maybe we're not going to get, hopefully we won't get a Netflix movie like with Jesse and from Breaking Bad and stuff like that. So maybe not. The newest South Park episode was really great, where Cartman tries to open up his own business of his home and a hot dog stand. Phenomenal. I think the best part about that is that Cartman's mom and Butters get revenge on Cartman. Cartman's mom is a character that has earned and deserved retribution against her son forever, and it was a nice little treat to see her get comeuppance on him. Last but not least, I want to talk about the Dragon Ball Super manga chapter that recently just dropped a few days ago. Chapter 91 for the Super run. And it seems like for the manga, we've caught up on to the superhero movie, where Cell Max and the Gamma droids are introduced. And this is really cool. I personally am not a big fan of the movies being adapted into the manga and the shows. I get like it's canon to show that, but I don't think we need to waste our time on that kind of story. I know uh the first two Super movies were canon with Beerus and Frieza. That kind of makes sense. There were some small differences with there. But Broly is still like a standalone movie. It's not the movie or events or the character, as far as I know, aren't considered canon yet, at least in the main run, but or the manga. I think Broly's featured in the superhero movie, like as a picture or still, but there really hasn't been any mention to the events of uh, Broly super movie in a very long time. And then we come up on the manga, which is really far ahead after the Tournament of Power, where we ended on the anime. I mean, we had the Moro arc, and then we had the Gas arc, and then we got the really quick tease for Black Frieza. So we all know like Black Frieza is doing something off in the foreground or the background somewhere, right? Obviously, he's destroying planets and everything, and the whole like tier list of who's strongest for right now is just out of whack. And we now that the manga has ended on the Gas arc, we get the Super arc, well, the superhero arc, and for the manga, the first few issues, 80, 89 to 90, 89 to 90, it focuses heavily on Trunks specifically and Goten, which is a really interesting perspective shift because Trunks, in terms of the show, and like in terms of the main franchise, Trunks who we've seen be a baby during the Cell Saga into like a kid during Boo, and then an adolescent if you count GT into what he is now for a high schooler in Super. You see him in a totally different light now as like a focused character. He's trying to go to school. He just wants to maybe hang out with girls in Goten, but there's like this criminal activity going on, and he's a faux Cybermen, Great Saiyaman kind of character, which is a cool dynamic, especially for these two. I always liked the faux superhero-ness that you get with Dragon Ball. Obviously with Great Saiyaman and then Great Saiyaman 2, they were teased around or shown off a little bit around the Buu saga, and you don't see them much anymore, especially because I guess Gohan just doesn't like fighting or doing anything like that in his old age. But I think it's not too great that we have to sit through the same story again in the manga, right? The movie came out almost a year ago. I think it was like midsummer last year that Superhero came out, and now I know for a fact that I'll have to read the chapters of the manga every month, and it's just the same as the movie. Maybe there's some minor differences with like lore for dialogue and stuff, but I don't know. I kind of want to just get propelled into what's going to be the future. I was hoping to see some Frieza Black stuff and everything like that. But we got Budokai Tenkaichi 4, which is going to be really good to look forward to. There's some contention there with who might be as a roster character, but we're getting all super characters. I think it's safe to say any Dragon Ball Z and super characters are just going to be in it hardcore. There's like no ifs ands buts about that. Dragon Ball and GT specifically, that might be a different story. Games are hard to make now, so you can't have as big rosters anymore. But a new Dragon Ball game would be great. Would really be great. Last thing is I am still trying to finish Pet Cemetery by Stephen King. I'm towards the end. He recently resurrected his son in the book, which is a really long scene. Really long scene. It's just the father going to the cemetery, or like lying to his wife and then going to the cemetery when they leave to their grandparents' house, and he goes and digs up his kid's grave, and he has this harrowing scene where he'll fix you, or everything will be all right. And then he goes and brings him to the burial ground, and that's just really, really heartbreaking because the family is pretty tight knit by the beginning of the book. I mean, you see a few scenes where they know enough about each other, like their quirks, even though like these kids are younger, but they have enough personality that the parents recognize how their kids act. I think that's really sweet, and it just makes the later half of the book all that more kind of depressing and heartbreaking when you see the like the actions of this family and the accident that has broken them begins to break them down apart. And I've said it before, but it's one of the King's best books. And I'm not sure what I'm going to read after this. I kind of like to read books by whatever strikes me at the time. But when I finish Pet Cemetery, I'm gearing up to probably start and finish this time Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert A. Heinlein. Um, I started it recently, a few months ago, and it kind of grabbed me for a bit. Um, I always have a problem remembering names. That was a big issue when I was trying to first read it. But I did like Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land, which was truly great. Kind of like A Shape of Water, but far better with like actual intelligence and thought rather than just I want to have sex with fish. Stranger in a Strange Land is just like a humanoid alien, right? It's not an alien per se, but it's like a different breed of human coming to Earth, and we kind of have to take that into account. It's definitely a weirder story. It came out in the 50s or 60s, so the writing and the perspectives of society and the world are very different for what Highland has viewed for what would be our present. I think I forget what year the book actually takes place in, but I'm pretty sure it's like a futuristic kind of 60s. Still really great. I remember that book being a hell of a lot of fun to read, especially when the stranger, the alien Martian wakes up, and his entire view of the world is what propels the book. He's like a little baby man. He doesn't know anything. He's a giant man-grown child with the emotion and the psychology of a like baby. So he has to be taught and learned and shown how the world works. But then you see him act as like this grown person with this wisdom, but almost like an old person, but maybe more like a childlike wonder that a child has, like because kids I get don't understand specifically war and other kinds of personal emotions, but uh to see this character kind of view humanity as like kind of like the way Superman views humanity, I would say. That's probably the biggest comparison I could think. Like Stranger in a Strange Land is like if Superman came to Earth but didn't really have superpowers and was probably a little more insightful or something like that. But it's still a really great book, and I hope to read that again, or at least finish Moon is a Harsh Mistress. This has been episode 3 of the Gamer Librarian podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, DZ, and Podcast Junkies. Be sure to follow for updates on episode releases. Thank you, and see you next time.